Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 490. My gosh, 490. Yes, it's true. 490 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. And on today's show, we're doing a lot. We're talking about deforestation, yes, but more specifically, we're talking about deforestation's link to pandemic. So let me back up. Two things happened last week, and both of them happening together created this episode. So the first event is personal, and the second is global. On the personal level, my family went on a lovely road trip. Stop number one on our road trip was Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. Now, it is a protected forest. Oh my gosh, it is gorgeous. We had a wonderful time getting lost in the woods, basically, for 3 days. Lots of hikes, lots of views, no noise pollution, just nature. It was rejuvenating. It reconnected me to nature in a way that, frankly, a hike in my local woods just can't do. And that's because of the time component. We stayed and we slept in the park for 3 entire days. 3 days is a great immersive experience. And I'm so grateful for that experience, for that time to wander with my family, for, of course, the opportunity to experience raw and wild nature and all its beauty. So that's thing one that happened last week. Thing two is the global news. Maybe you heard or read that the World Health Organization declared a global emergency over the new Mpox. Mpox is formerly known as monkeypox. And the last time the WHO made that call was in 2022, when an outbreak affected nearly 100,000 people worldwide, primarily gay and bisexual men, including more than 32,000 people in the United States. Now, this time around, the WHO's decision was prompted by an escalating crisis of Mpox in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It has spread to a dozen other countries, and if it's not contained, experts do warn that the virus may rampage, for lack of a better word, all over the world. I mean, in Sweden, they just had their first reported case of Mpox, and it came from a person who had traveled to Africa first. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read this Mpox news, I had flashbacks to masks and social distancing and disinfecting everything and staying in your house and shutting down life as we know it. Oh my goodness, no, don't even suggest to me, World Health Organization, that we could potentially be going back, because I don't want to hear it. So those two things together are making this episode today. And I want to be clear that this episode is not about pandemics. It's not about Mpox. It's more so an episode about deforestation. Now, I am coming at this big and a very important topic of deforestation through the lens of pandemics. And that's because we all know the pain of living through a pandemic, don't we? COVID-19, at least here in New England, COVID-19 is having a bit of a resurgence. Plans are getting canceled due to someone testing positive for the latest COVID variant. I'm seeing more and more masks being worn as I'm out and about. And so today we're talking about the ways in which deforestation is linked to pandemics so that we may tackle the topic of deforestation from a personal lens. Deforestation seems like this thing that happens on other continents, far away. It doesn't affect us. My goal today is to bring it home and personalize it. So yes, today we're doing an awful lot. And by the way, this is not an easy breezy episode. It's an episode that tackles a big and important topic. But hey, guess what? You can handle it. We can talk about decluttering later. Today, we're talking about deforestation. So part one today, it's an intro into what on earth deforestation is, why it stinks, and how exactly deforestation is linked to the rise in prevalence of pandemics. That's part one. And part two, after our break, are the action steps. What can we do? In part one, I'm going to fire you up. I'm going to perhaps make you a little angry, perhaps make you a little bit nervous. Part 2 is about giving you back your agency. Let's all step up and do something about it. That's part 2. All right, so long intro today. Let's get into the meat, shall we? What is deforestation? You probably already know it, but let's just say it so we're all on the same page. Deforestation happens when wild areas like forests, like rainforests, whenever a natural ecosystem is cut down, that's deforestation. The main drivers of deforestation are the production of timber, as well as the clearing of land for cattle, for soy, for palm oil production. So we're going to talk about all that in a little bit in our action steps, but take those facts and put them to the side, put them in the back of your mind. We're going to access them later. So I'll say it again. Yes, we cut down trees for timber. We also cut down forests to grow cattle, to grow soy, and to grow oil palms for palm oil. All right, so since 2016, 28 million hectares of forest have been cut down every year on average. That's about, so who knows what a hectare is? I have no idea. Let's put it into American terms. That is one football field of forest lost every single second of every single day of every single year since 2016. Holy moly. Holy moly. A football field is cut down every single second? Take a deep breath, I know. Now, tropical rainforests in particular, they have more than 210 gigatons of carbon stored within its trees. Let's go back to 6th grade science. Plants and trees, they suck in carbon. Suck in is not the scientific term, but they remove carbon dioxide from the air. They do their magic and then release oxygen so that we can all breathe. So the carbon is stored within the trees, within the plants. And when we cut down the trees, when we raze, R-A-Z-E, the plants, we're releasing all that carbon that nature has so lovingly and efficiently stored for us. We're releasing all that carbon back into the air. Carbon in the atmosphere, excess carbon in the atmosphere, I should say, is a major cause of global warming, and global warming is the major driver of climate change. Now, deforestation is also a major cause of biodiversity loss. And that's mainly because deforestation, by definition, means that we are erasing habitats that plants and animals rely on to thrive. So a loss of forests means major losses of species. Forests, of course, rainforests, they are home to 70% of the world's plants and animals. Now, when we mess with forests, we're also messing with the water cycle. Over half of the water in rainforests is held within the plant. So we humans, we're not just cutting down trees and, oh, who cares? We're sticking our noses in complex ecosystems. We are messing with complex systems, and in this case, cycles, the water cycle, in lasting ways. Now, I should say, too, deforestation causes soil erosion, and soil erosion is a main driver of desertification. Now, if you listen to my episode all about the importance of healthy soil, I'll link to it in the show notes, you already know that we are rapidly creating a desert out of our lush and green planet. And that is because we're cutting down the lushness. We're cutting down the green. And what happens? Our soil erodes. It loses what makes it healthy. Enter desertification. According to the United Nations, desertification is potentially the biggest threat to the world's ecosystems. Now, how bad is deforestation? I mentioned the football fields, but let's really nail it down. About 17% of the Amazonian rainforest has been destroyed over the past 50 years. And losses have recently been on the rise. The organization Amazon Conservation does report, as per National Geographic, that destruction rose by 21% in 2020, and that is a loss the size of the country of Israel. Now, 80% of Earth's land animals and plants live in forests. And so when we remove the trees, when we cut them down, we are depriving the forest of portions of its canopy, which blocks the sun's rays during the day and retains heat at night. That major disruption leads to more extreme temperature swings that can be harmful to plants and animals. 47% of the world's forests, and this is according to the World Wildlife Fund, by the way, 47% of the world's forests are at high risk for deforestation or degradation by the year 2030. And by the way, 2030 is in 5 years, basically. Now, we're going to talk about pandemics in a minute, but let's just talk about healthy forests for a hot minute. What is a healthy forest? How do we know if a forest is actually healthy? The biggest marker of any healthy ecosystem is biodiversity. Biodiversity means that there is a wide variety of species from all kingdoms of life, whether that's plants or animals or fungi or microorganisms that we can't see. Biodiversity is the marker for ecosystem health. And so healthy forests typically have a mix of saplings and young trees interspersed with the really tall stuff. Healthy forests have plenty of trees and shrubs and grasses with robust root systems that control erosion. When there aren't enough plants to hold the soil, rains can funnel too much dirt and ash and other debris into ponds and lakes and other bodies of water, which muddies these bodies of water. Trees that fall naturally, so downed logs, let's say, that might be a better way of saying that, but trees that fall naturally, they provide shelter for animals in cavities and burrows. And areas with patchy tree cover allow sun and rain to reach the short plants, the sprouts, the ground. And so healthy ecosystems, I really want to make the point here, healthy ecosystems happen when we humans keep our noses out of it. Nature, by and large, creates healthy forests all on its own. It's when we step in that the problems perhaps happen. Now, speaking of healthy ecosystems, let's bring in the viruses and potential pandemics piece. Many viruses exist harmlessly with their host animals in healthy forests, and that's because the animals have co-evolved with the viruses. Diseases are filtered and blocked by a range of predators and habitats when the rainforest is healthy and biodiverse. Now, generally, not always, of course, but generally, nature takes care of us if we let nature be. But when biodiverse forests are replaced with farms, with monoculture farms, so we cut down this biodiverse forest and we grow just the oil palm or just the soy fields, what happens then? Many predators die off, diverse populations of animals die off, and that leaves the generalists. What are the generalists? The generalists are the rats. The generalists are the mosquitos. The generalists thrive and spread pathogens across human and non-human habitats. The net result is, of course, a loss of natural disease regulation. Now, when humans either venture into forests or disease-carrying animals are drawn out of forests due to the fact that we cut them down, humans can become unwitting hosts for pathogens. A disease ecologist at the University of California at Santa Barbara says, quote, "It is pretty well established that deforestation can be a strong driver of infectious disease transmission. It is a numbers game. The more we degrade and clear forest habitats, the more likely it is that we're going to find ourselves in these situations where epidemics or infectious diseases occur." So don't take my word for it. Take Andy McDonald's. He's a disease ecologist. So you might be saying to yourself, okay, that makes sense, but has this ever happened? Does this happen? The answer is yes. And I have 4 examples to just blow your mind. Get ready. Let's go to 1997. I'll remind you of the Nipah virus. In 1997, a large area in the rainforests of Indonesia were burned to make way for agriculture. When we burn forests, there's smoke, and there was so much smoke that the remaining trees could not produce fruit. That left resident fruit bats with no other option than to fly elsewhere in search of food. And when they flew elsewhere, they carried with them the Nipah virus. So the bats, they settled on trees in Malaysian orchards, and that caused pigs and pig farmers to become sick. And that's presumably after eating fallen fruit that the bats had partially eaten. By 1999, 265 people had developed severe brain inflammation. 105 people died. It was the first known emergence of the Nipah virus in people, which has since caused a string of recurrent outbreaks across Southeast Asia. Okay, that's the Nipah virus. Let's go to 2014. We'll talk about Ebola. The Ebola virus epidemic of 2014-2016 killed over 11,000 people in West Africa. The first spillover of the virus happened from fruit bats to a toddler who was playing near trees where bats were roosting. Now, we're talking about bats for a minute. Let me also just say here, too, a November 22 study found that when bats struggle to find a suitable habitat, they will travel closer to human communities. However, when bats' native habitats are left intact, bats will and want to stay away from humans. And so this research is the first to show that we can predict and avoid spillovers through monitoring, through maintaining wildlife habits. So the bats don't want to hang out with us. The bats don't want to give us Nipah or Ebola, but they are when they are forced into human habitats. Okay, so that's Ebola. Let's go on to malaria. We've already established that clearing patches of forest creates the ideal habitat along forest edges for the type of mosquito that transmits malaria in the Amazon and allows that mosquito to breed. And so, yes, malaria kills over 1 million people every single year due to infection by Plasmodium parasites. That's transmitted by the mosquitoes. Between 2003 and 2015, on average, a 10% yearly increase in forest loss led to a 3% rise in malaria. All right, one more. I know I'm getting fired up here. Let's talk about the Lassa virus. In Liberia, forest clearings for palm oil plantations attract hordes, and I do mean hordes, of typically forest-dwelling mice. They were lured there by the abundance of palm fruit around plantations and settlements. Now, humans can contract the Lassa virus when they come into contact with food or objects contaminated with feces or urine of virus-carrying rodents. In people, the virus causes a hemorrhage-like fever. In Liberia, it killed 36% of infected people. So I hope I've convinced you. Deforestation does lead to outbreaks of very powerful diseases. Now, you might be saying to yourself, what about controlled burns? I live in a wildfire-prone area, and people are always doing controlled burns. How does that play into today's conversation? For the most part, controlled burns are not contributing to deforestation. When they're implemented correctly, and I mean, there's an incorrect way to do this, of course, but if they're done correctly, controlled burns actually help the health of forests. Wildfires are just a part, and they're a natural part of many healthy ecosystems. But the difficulty now of managing wildfires, especially around people, have led to decades of fire suppression by the U.S. Forest Service and other agencies during the last century. Now, when these fires are suppressed, flammable materials accumulate. Insect infestations increase. Forests become more crowded with trees and underbrush, and invasive plant species move in. Controlled burns seek to accomplish the benefits that regular fires historically have provided to an environment while also preventing the fires from burning out of control and threatening life and property. So my point there is controlled burns, when they're done correctly, that's not the same as deforestation, okay? So as we wrap up part 1 and head into part 2 of our discussion today, the take-home message is, when we mess with ecosystems, when we humans stick our noses in where they don't belong and we mess with ecosystems, we are increasing the chances that these diseases will spread from animals to humans. I think I made the point. I think I did a really good job there. I'm going to pat myself on the back. And now I'm going to transition. We're moving into our ad break. But after the ad break, we're going to talk about what can we do? What are the action steps? How can we can't stop deforestation, right? Like you and me, we don't have that power unless President Biden or some other really powerful person in a governmental role is listening. The rest of us, we can't stop deforestation, but we can at the very least, stop contributing to the problem. So that's what we're going to talk about after our very quick sponsor break. And we're back. Before the break, we discussed deforestation, and specifically, we discussed the ways in which deforestation contributes to the prevalence and rise of viruses that otherwise would have been taken care of by nature are transmitted to humans. We are now on to part 2 of today's discussion, where we're discussing what we all can do. We cannot stop deforestation, but we can do our best to contribute less to the problem or even better, contribute not at all. So yes, of course, you can plant more trees. But I do feel like the planting more trees suggestion undermines the severity of the deforestation problem. So yeah, okay, of course, engage in tree planting initiatives in your community. Donate to tree planting organizations, sure. Also, if you own land, don't rush to cut down your trees. If you were to look at my yard, if you were to come on over and see my yard, you would see an awful lot of pine trees very close to our home. And you might say to yourself, those big trees with those short root systems should not be so close to your dwelling. That might be true, but I will say we have had them looked at by an arborist, and the arborist said with a fair degree of certainty that at that point in time, they're healthy. They do not need to come down simply because they're pines and they're close to a home. And so there are organizations that will come out and look at your trees and give you their general thoughts on, is this healthy? Does this need to come down or not? I suggest you look into those organizations. We don't need to cut down trees just because everybody else wants the flat and treeless lawn. So that's not a suggestion. That's just a little bit of a rant from me. But my first suggestion, and I will say my suggestions today go in like difficulty rank. So the first one should be fairly easy for all of us. And as we continue down, my suggestions, they get a little bit more challenging as we go. So stay with me. This next one is where we start to get into the meat and potatoes, and that is to make paper valuable again. The global paper production capacity is projected to reach 510 million tons by next year. And that, of course, is driven for the rising demand for packaging. Guess what? We're all shopping online. We have so many packages coming to our house, as well as printing and writing paper products. So I want you to look at all the paper products in your home, and I want you to look at them for what they are. They are modern marvels. Modern marvels, MMs. The paper manufacturing process is so complex and is so resource intensive. It involves converting raw materials like a tree into wood chips, into high quality paper products. So it's about harvesting the trees, converting them into wood chips. The wood chips then go through so many countless mechanical and chemical treatments to separate the cellulose fibers from the lignin and other impurities in the wood. This is called pulping, by the way. It can be done in various ways. Then after it's pulped, it's transported to the paper mill where it undergoes further processing. I'm talking refining, then forming, then pressing, then drying, then finishing. And only then do you get a piece of paper. Paper is really darn marvelous, right? It's an it's a modern marvel. Let's start treating it as such. Let's start treating it as such. So let's save paper. Let's not waste paper. Let's not recycle paper products and boxes just because we cross our fingers and pray that it's actually going to get recycled. Because spoiler alert, it's probably not going to. But anyway, let's remember, paper is an It's a modern marvel. So let's start treating it as such. Now, when you can, of course, go paperless. Reduce paper consumption by going digital. At home, at work, wherever you can. Whenever you do need to print, use both sides of the paper. Save scraps. And yes, of course, we all have to buy paper products in our lives. But when you can't go paperless, go for those items with a high percentage of recycled fibers. We'll talk about recycled fibers next. But I have to say, doing all of that is likely not going to stop deforestation. However, it is going to make you and anybody else who's observing your habits remember that paper is a modern marvel and it is worth revering. It's worth saving. It's worth not wasting, right? We're so wasteful here in America. It's gross. It's really gross, isn't it? How wasteful we are. Let's stop wasting paper whenever we can help it. Easy. We can all do that. All right, my next tip, a little bit harder, but not out of reach for most of us, is to, when we have to buy a wood product, go for the third-party certified ones. So there's the Rainforest Alliance certification, yes, but I must admit, my North Star is the Forest Stewardship Council. That FSC label, it's like a green rectangle with a tree that turns into a check mark. That label, first of all, there's 3 of them. There's 3 levels of certification, and I'm going to break through them really quick. But in general, the FSC label guarantees that trees cut down to make the product that you are buying, those trees were harvested in an environmentally and socially conscious way. And so, yes, there are 3 labels. There's the FSC 100%. That label means that all materials used come from responsibly managed FSC certified forests. That is the gold standard in terms of the 3 certifications. So if you have to only look for one, look for the FSC 100%. There's also, though, the FSC recycled certification, which means that the product that has this label, this pretty picture, let's say, the product is made from 100% recycled materials. And of course, when we're using recycled materials, we're not cutting down raw timber. Amazing. Okay. And then finally, the third FSC certification, it is the mix certification. And this certification certifies that the product you're putting in your cart is made with a mixture of materials from FSC certified forests and recycled materials or FSC controlled wood. So they're all good. FSC 100 or FSC recycled, the best. Okay. Now we're getting into our more intermediate steps where it gets a little tricky. And my next action step for you is to avoid products with palm oil. But I say that with an asterisk next to it, and we'll get to the asterisk in a minute. Palm oil. So growing the oil palm to get palm oil to put in all our products, that contributes significantly to deforestation. So have you ever heard of palm oil? Its usage in all of our stuff has risen a whopping 263% in the last 15 years. It's in our toothpaste, it's in our shampoo, it's in our pets' food, our makeup, our food that we eat. And yes, its cultivation has dire consequences for our forests and rainforests. So I've done an episode on this. The episode is a few years old, but guess what? In my humble opinion, the episode's still really darn good and it's still really darn actionable. I've linked to it in the show notes. It's episode 187 if you missed it. And in that episode, my guest suggests that we avoid products containing palm oil where possible. Now, I should mention here, so here's where the asterisk comes in. The World Wildlife Fund takes a different stance on this issue. And their stance is that it's not palm oil that's the problem. It's how and where it's grown. That's the problem. The World Wildlife Fund cites the fact that palm oil is efficient and productive. It supplies 35% of the world's vegetable oil demand and just 10% of the land used to grow vegetable oil crops. If we're going to cut down a forest, like palm oil will give you more bang for your buck, let's say. And because of that, the WWF argues that boycotting palm oil will therefore cause more deforestation, not less, because then soybean or coconut would then be grown instead, which is less efficient, which would contribute to more deforestation. So that's a good thought here. And I agree with the World Wildlife Fund in that we need companies to use only sustainable palm oil. And sustainable palm oil would, of course, be ones that respect and safeguard people and nature. But to my knowledge, as of this moment, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, write to me, but I do not know of any sustainable palm oil certification that's out there as of now. And I'll also say too, palm oil is not at all healthy from a human health perspective. There's another potential reason that we might want to boycott palm oil if possible. But listen to my episode 187 on palm oil and do what's best for you and your family. Know that palm oil is not benign, and the cultivation of the oil palm at this moment in time comes with significant environmental risks. All right, next step, and you know I'm going to say it. Perhaps the hardest of all, and that is to reduce your meat consumption, or in a perfect world, eliminate it entirely. Yes, I mentioned it at the beginning. Remember I said take the fact, put it in the back of your mind, and we'll come back to it. We're coming back to it. It's the meat problem. Forests, rainforests, they are often cut down so that the livestock we eat has a place to grow before slaughter. This is, of course, one of the reasons why today's carnivorous diet is so bad for the planet. But forests are also cut down to grow soy. I want to be clear. When we cut down forests to grow soy, it's not so that humans can consume the soy. It's soy that feeds the poultry and the pigs that we then eat. So this means that when we eat chicken, for example, that chicken that was grown may have indirectly caused deforestation. It ate the soy, and the soy was only grown because the forest was cut down, let's say. We often hear about eat less beef. Oh, we're clearing forests to grow cows. But that's not the full picture. The full picture is about realizing that when we eat any land animal, it's likely causing deforestation. Now, I need to talk about the protein problem for a minute. My book of the summer, so the book I read this summer that made the biggest impact on my life was Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. I've mentioned this book on a previous episode. Highly recommend it. It's about the science of longevity. The author makes the argument in the book that each and every one of us, we should be eating. Now hold on to your hats because this is going to blow you away. He argues that we should be eating 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight every single day. I know, right? So if you're 150 pounds, you should be eating 150 grams of protein every single day. Also, of course, if you're eating 150 grams of protein a day, you have to cut back on the carbohydrates. Otherwise, you'll just be overeating, and then all that protein and excess will be stored as fat. So more protein, less carbs, I guess, is underlying message. But how on earth can you get 150-ish grams of protein a day without eating animals? As a vegetarian, I'm still trying to figure that out. I'll be honest. For me, it's a lot of eggs. It's lentils, beans, tofu, sometimes meat substitutes. It's tough. I do not have all the answers, but I will say that I recognize the fact that our industrialized food system is so unbelievably broken. It's broken. And so if it is available and accessible to you, perhaps it's time to step back from the industrialized food system. Perhaps, again, if it's accessible and available to you, you shorten your food chain. An item in the supermarket, let's say, a meat item in the supermarket, goes from the farm to the slaughterhouse, to the packaging and distribution center, to the store, and then finally to your plate. So that's a 5-step chain, right? Can you shorten that? Can you make it 4 steps or 3 or 2? Your farmer's market, if you were to buy, assuming you even have a farmer's market near you, which I know a lot of us don't, if you were to choose a meat product, because you love meat, ethical concerns aside, from a local sustainable farm, that item then would shorten your chain to just 3 steps. It went from farm to farmer's market to your plate. So 3 steps as opposed to 5. If you raise your own animals for your own consumption, that's even shorter. It's your yard to your plate, 2 steps. So yes, consider choosing meat products from local sustainable farms. Maybe your local farmer's market does sell responsibly raised meat, which also very likely was at the very least ethically raised. Doing so will help reduce the demand for products that were grown and raised on deforested land. Maybe it's about embracing more meat substitutes. And if you're concerned about the ultra-processed food problem with the meat substitutes like I am personally, maybe it's about keeping your finger on the pulse with regard to lab-raised meat, which is rapidly becoming a thing, by the way. These are all options. I do not have the answer. I do know, however, that our industrialized food system is broken. It's broken. So whatever we can do to step away from that, I say 2 thumbs up. Now, one more suggestion for you, and it is the last one, not necessarily because it's the hardest, it's perhaps the easiest of them all, but it's last because I don't want you to rely on it. And that is to offset your carbon footprint in ways that protect existing forests or even perhaps plant new trees. Now, maybe this is better than nothing. Maybe, I don't know. Expose after expose, they're coming out about carbon offset scams these days. If you've been paying attention, you know what I mean. So don't put all your eggs in the carbon offset basket. Don't think like you can continue to live your life the way you've been living it and just donate some money here or there or everywhere and you're in the clear. No, that's not right. We here in America, we need to collectively and fundamentally change the way we live and change the way we consume. There's no sugarcoating it. I'm not sugarcoating it today, but perhaps next time you see a tree planting or deforestation fighting carbon offset program, you look into it, you vet it, perhaps. So what's my final word today? My final word is that, yes, we tend to forget that when we go to the store or when we shop online, the items in our cart were made on planet Earth. And when they were made on planet Earth, they have environmental consequences associated with them. And I'm not just talking about the raw materials, the wood, the metal, the water used to run the machines to create something out of this raw product. I'm not talking about all that. I'm reminding us all that in this 21st century world is flat, globalized economy that we're living in, there are consequences to putting stuff in our carts, to buying stuff that we don't need. And it always comes back to the same thing on this show, doesn't it? Sound like a broken record, but consider your purchases carefully. Buy what you need. And when you do buy better, buy with more intention. Same final word as every single day, 490 episodes. It's like always the same final word. All right, so that's our show. Thursday's episode is one I'm very excited for. It's about advertising, and more specifically, it's about the very important things that advertisers know about us that we perhaps don't know about ourselves. So that's Thursday's episode. I can't wait for it. If you like this show, please review it. I must say, ad sponsors are dwindling. I am currently looking for a real job because the podcast isn't covering it. So if you love the show and want it to continue, please consider becoming a subscriber for $5 a month. That will help the show continue in ways that I can't even verbalize at the moment. So thank you so much for considering. That's also in the show notes. Oh, by the way, if you sent me an email and I haven't responded, I'm really sorry. Send me another email. My inbox needs some help. like some major help. So if I haven't responded, it's not personal. It's me. Just email me again and it'll bump it up and then I'll respond. But I'll see you Thursday. Again, reach out if you need me. Reach out again if you've already needed me and I never responded. It's not personal. It's me. I'll see you Thursday and take care.